Yes, and after an hour-long pre-production, we are finally ready to get this episode going. And first of all, we of course, have to apologize because our last week's episode was kind of postponed. Oh, it is postponed because we had some slight difficulties. Schedule issues. So our episode with Thomas will be postponed in the coming future. So today we will have a whole other topic ready for today, and once again we have Mikkel in the studio, who was in the opening episode of season 2. Hello. And we have of course Bobber and Rasmus here too.
Hello.
So today's topic is really contemporary because it's actually. We're going to talk about Jordan Peele and his movie Get Out, which was released 2 years ago. But he just came out with his new movie, Us. And
great movie, by the way.
Yeah, Baba has seen the movie, so we're not going to talk about it yet. So we're going to talk about Get Out, and also we're going to talk about the Jordan Peele controversy. So, Mikkel, if you could enlighten us about the controversy.
Yes. Jordan Peele was recently, of course, out on the press tour for his new movie, and he was asked a lot of questions. And at one point, he was asked about casting a white man in his lead, and he said, "I don't see myself casting a white dude as the lead in my movie." And this is what everyone has been reporting. Of course, they missed the larger context in which he continues and says, "Not that I don't like white dudes, but I've seen that movie. It really is one of the best, greatest pieces of this story, is feeling like we're in this time. A renaissance has happened and proven the myths about representation in the industry are false." So he was really celebrating the wider representation in Hollywood, but it was of course taken as him being racist by certain parts of the population that he would not cast a white lead. So he's gotten quite a lot of heat from certain people on Twitter for that.
Yeah, and well, like we talked about in pre-production, this is the classic social justice warriors on the conservative side. And this is just a point I want to ham home. There's a lot of people who think that it's the left as always, these social justice warriors get offended by everything. And it is true to some extent that there are some people on the left where they take everything too far. But it also happens on the other side. It's not just something that's happened in one area of the political spectrum, because this is just as absurd as some of the things people are complaining about on the left side. Because he never said he didn't like white people. His entire point is that he wanted to make a movie about black people for black people, because he also is an African American.
Yeah, I mean, it's just missing the whole picture, and on purpose. If I have to be honest, if you know some of the conservative sides, it's just to give some backlash against the left side at times. But you have some people who are actually offended, but some also use it as a tool to try to spark some debate.
But it's also a way of them to try and change the narrative about what racism is in America, because a lot of people want to focus on systemic racism and these issues that are really tied up in the structure of America that are really unfair to minorities. But of course, what they're then trying to do here by doing this is to say, oh no, racism affects everyone. It also affects white people, and thereby take the power away from minorities of saying we are being oppressed in some way. We are being hampered in our opportunities. So if they can make it seem like white people are as much victims of racism, then everything
is fair.
Then everything is fair.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the whole thing about the Jordan Peele controversy, and I mean it's not the biggest controversy, but it's something. But let's just talk about the movie Get Out, and maybe a little bit about Jordan Peele, because as we know, Jordan Peele wasn't always a director or a producer, and he was actually a comedian. I mean, he started doing sketches with Mad TV with Keegan.
Yes, even before that, I believe he was in the Second City Chicago improv group, which is like a really famous improv comedy scene that's put out a lot of talent. and that's where he met Keegan-Michael Key, and the two have made a lot of comedy since then. Most famously, of course, their Key and Peele show, with Obama's anger translator and all these other classic sketches.
I mean, we were just watching the Civil War reenactment. Just one of the most hilarious skits
that's
ever.
one of my favorites.
So I mean, he's just basically one of the funniest people ever to live.
But even back then, he really started showing off that he had chops of other, in other genres, that he, could pull in some stuff from horror, that he can pull in some stuff from action. So he's able to do more than just that, and that really came out when he did Get Out after the end of Key and Peele.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the fascinating aspect of Jordan Peele, like how he's gone from this comedic genius to actually be a pretty damn good director
and writer.
I mean, I was really, really impressed when I saw Get Out for the first time. To see everything from the visual to the symbolism in the movie to the writing, it was just.
I mean, it's an incredibly tightly plotted story. I mean, there's so many things when you watch it the second time, you're like, wow, how did I miss that? Or wow.
Yeah, well, the thing about Get Out was that it basically sort of came out of nowhere. People, of course, knew who Jordan Peele was, but he was that funny guy from the Key and Peele sketches. By the way, that's hilarious. You should watch it. It's kind of like the Dave Chappelle show after Dave Chappelle left the comedic scene. But people did not really expect much from this movie, and it came out and was an absolute smash hit.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is fascinating with the movie is how we always knew from the Key and Peele show to the Mad TV show that Jordan Peele was really good at using humor as a way of reflecting the racist society. I mean, using surrealism to actually show how another side of racism that isn't as, how do you say, you can see with the naked eye. And he was really good with that, with comedy. But now he does it with horror. And I haven't quite seen a way of doing that before Get Out, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure if anyone has tried.
I mean, before, the role of black people in a horror movie was the one who died first.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the trope. So it's
I mean, it was always the black guy was always in the horror movies the one to always detect the dangers. Yeah, the first one. But he also was the one who dies first. I mean,
and he was normally also just this token black person.
Yes.
Because there was normally always only one black person when they have diversity, and it's kind of absurd in a way that they always have a group of white teenagers and then one black dude who's going to die first.
Now that I actually remember, maybe Jordan Peele isn't the first one. I remember scary movies. Do you remember the series of scary movie? Shorty. Like he is the parody of the black guy in the horror movie because he's actually one who always survives. That's the parody of the.
Actually, there is one where the black guy is the one who survives, which is the original George Romero's Day of the Dead.
That's true.
Which, I mean, there it's the black guy who survives to the end because he is the one who is most resourceful, who's most used to adversity. And then, of course, when he meets other people who survived, it does not go well.
But I think most people know if we are watching a horror movie, we're talking about who do you think is going to die first, and everybody say the black guy.
Yeah.
So it is sort of a thing that everybody have noticed. It's sort of a meme.
Yeah, I mean, also when I think of Shorty and Scary Movie, I mean, that's just a classic. I mean, it was just way funnier when I was a child, but
it's not as funny anymore.
No, it's not. But it was way funnier when you were a kid. But I remember, I see a higher purpose with the way we're talking about it right now. But yeah, let's talk about Get Out because it's such a groundbreaking movie. Because the whole thing, one of the things that I always found fascinating with what Jordan Peele is saying is that black people are misrepresented.
Yeah,
when it comes to horror movies, just like we said, and that's where the controversy also came in. Because the whole thing about the statement was that we are in a time where it's possible now that we can get the black representation in the horror movies in a proper way. So,
yeah, I mean, it was also a movie that was unafraid to make white upper class citizens into the bad guys. I mean, they're not. I mean, of course, there's been movies where they're the bad guy before, but this is one where like they were genuinely creepy, evil people.
Yeah. By the way, probably some spoilers for Get Out. We are not going to go into spoil us because I'm the only one who have seen it. But Get Out, if you haven't seen it, you should go watch it.
Yeah.
But there's probably going to be some spoilers about this movie.
Exactly. And and Jordan Peele actually told this story when he was approaching Universal Studios with this idea of a movie. He would never have thought that they would say yes to the movie because all of the bad guys in the movies are white. I mean, even Chris is the protagonist of the movie. He has this white girlfriend he trusts everything with, and she ends up being the one who lured him into the danger. So, and he was really shocked when they said, "This is a brilliant idea."
And I gotta be honest, when the first time I saw it, I was having I saw that this was gonna go wrong. But I kept wanting to believe her to be on his side because she played it so well,
really good,
so well. I mean, both because you had the scene in the car on the way up at first where she's like get really upset about racial profiling, which of course when you know the end, you know that it's not about racial profiling. She just didn't want to leave a paper trail. But she made it seem like it was. I mean, that's just a brilliant scene.
Yeah. But I don't even think that the racial profiling is not because she doesn't want to leave a paper trail. Because, and now we're in full spoiler territory. You have already spoiled that the girlfriend is one of the bad persons, people. The thing about Get Out is that it's a bunch of middle-class white people who are buying black people's bodies so they can transfer their consciousness into the black body when they're getting older. So you can also talk about this entire aspect. When they're getting to be the black people, they don't want to be racially profiled because they have never lived this society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also it's not that they're any less racist for it because they are really fetishizing the black body.
Exactly.
Which is also an incredibly creepy aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. And we're gonna talk about this a lot later. I mean, but it's really fascinating with the way that we have never seen villains portrayed this way, not this racially portrayed, because
but both that it was white upper middle class people, but also the cold business like way that they did their shit. I mean, this wasn't some psychopath who just enjoyed killing. This was an organized way of doing some bad shit.
It was basically the slave trade in the modern era. Yeah. It was also portrayed in almost the same way when we were bidding on who wants to buy this black person's body.
Exactly.
That was completely taken out of how the slave trade was.
Yeah, and one of the things I really was interested in, so Get Out, just by saying all these kind of things, everyone can see that Get Out is not the prototypical horror movie. What is it about the difference in this movie that really captured the interest of so many people? Because it was a box office movie. It became that.
I mean, one is of course that it's a great horror movie. That's of course the first step. I mean, if he'd made a shitty movie with great allegories and themes, it wouldn't have been the success. No. But then there's the whole layer on top of the racial aspect of it. It's a thing I really think a lot of people were surprised by how thoughtful and how interesting his perspective on it was. And also I think it was it was great for black people having a horror movie. So of course they will go out to see it.
Yeah.
And then the way that they're portrayed, I mean, the whole conversation with the TSA buddy about how if the black people would never fall for stuff like that, then just get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
And then he keeps saying, "Get out of there! Get out of there!"
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, this was maybe one of the least scary movies ever for me, because for me, I mean, I could watch this movie 12 o'clock at midnight and watch the whole movie. I could do that, but I still put it as one of the greatest horror movies I've seen. That's what I feel is interesting, or is it just me?
What I think is interesting about Jordan Peele's way of making horror movies, and why I also like Get Out a lot, and also the new movie Us. I'm not a big fan of horror movies. Mostly I think they're boring, and normally the scary part is they're filled with jump scares.
Yeah.
And I hate jump scares. I don't think it's scary, I just think it's annoying. John Peel doesn't use a lot of jump scares, maybe one. And even in Us, there's probably not even one jump scare in the movie, just so you know. So if you're a person who hates jump scares, you can go and watch Us. There isn't any jump scares in the movie. And the same about Get Out. So it doesn't rely on this, what I would argue is a cheap tactic to get a scare out of you.
Yeah. But I also think that his horror is less of that, creep factor, and more this, existential or social aspect of horror. That it's not about how, this is horribly haunted house or something like that. It's just this is how people can view black people, and that's scary. That's the scary part. And of course, when we're the white people in this situation, we might not find it as scary, but it's still. I mean, it's a good demonstration of this way that this situation, how it was for black people. I mean, it's almost a way to understand, the cruelty of slavery. I mean, these thinking individuals who were treated in this way.
I think one of the things they do extremely well was to, even though Chris, the protagonist, is a black guy in the movie, they made him so relatable.
Yeah, he's not stereotypical black.
No.
I mean, he doesn't live up to all the Hollywood stereotypes at all.
Exactly, and just when you look at the beginning of the movie, I think actually the beginning of the movie is really essential to the development of the story, because basically it's just someone who is afraid of meeting his girlfriend's parents for the first time. I mean, who haven't been there. I mean,
but of course, there's also the aspect
racial aspect of it.
Will they disapprove because of his race?
Exactly. Yeah. But we have this, being afraid of going into your girlfriend's parents' house because you're afraid of their disapproving you. That's a fear everyone can relate to. So Chris is not the stereotypical black guy you usually see in scary movies. He's someone you can relate to, and that's why I think it has a great. It was a great contributor to the story.
And that's also why this entire John Peel controversy is pretty absurd on its face, because John Peel, because he's an African American, he knows the experience, and that's why he's so good at portraying these African American characters who are not going to be stereotyped. And I would also argue, and that might be a little bit controversial itself, because conservatives always say, what if it was all the other way around? If white people said, I'm not going to cast a black person as the lead. Yeah, I know people would say it's racist, but you could make an argument there's nothing wrong with it if this person is saying, I'm not going to cast a black person as the lead because I do not know how to portray a black experience, because I do not know how they live. I do not know this experience. That's a completely valid point, and that's what John Peel knows. And you can say the same thing about a movie like Wonder Woman, directed by a woman, a lot of female characters, and that's one of the greatest, probably the greatest superhero film with a woman lead in it, because that's also taking the woman's perspective. And that's extremely important, that people, there's this idea that everybody can make a movie as long as the movie is good, but it's difficult to make a movie good about other people's representation if you do not know the experiences.
And that's what we've been seeing. I mean, not just with Wonder Woman, but we saw it with Captain Marvel, even though it was also co-directed by a man. But also they've announced a Black Widow movie that's also going to be directed by a woman. And they've the Black Panther movie was directed by a black man, and he's going to direct the second one too. Plus the Crazy Rich Asians movie, which is also directed by an Asian. I mean, so we've really seen minority directors and behind the scenes people who are also given a chance in this industry. It's not just the actors who get to portray characters, but also behind the scenes.
Not only that, but they're actually having success with it. That's the most important thing, because I think the ultimate excuse in Hollywood has always been that it wouldn't be profitable to do these kind of things, because we've seen a lot of movies where people where the roles that were supposed to be minorities are actually just occupied by Hollywood superstars because that's profitable.
Yeah. But we've talked about this at one point in class when we discussed whiteness studies, how it's only white men who are unable to really relate to other people partly because that they are not used to seeing other people represented in media. They're used to just seeing their own perspective replicated again and again and again in media, and that makes it hard. That means that they don't have the same experience in relating to other people. And I think that's perhaps being dissolved now, because we have the internet, and we have all these things that allow us to it's much easier to get out, to find other perspectives, to find other material that is different from what you know.
And that's actually the aspect I love the most about this Hollywood elites that do not want to cast black directors with a black lead and so on, because it's every time these Hollywood elites get proven wrong, I think it's a beautiful thing, and it happened a lot in modern days. For example, Deadpool is also an example. People did not want to make an R-rated superhero film because they didn't think people would see it. That was one of the highest-grossing superhero movies at the time.
It's breaking the conventions of superheroes.
Exactly, and the same with Black Panther. I mean, you can argue how good the movie is. I think it's a good movie, not as amazing as some people think, but it completely broke records. And it's the same thing with the new Captain Marvel. There was a huge backlash, a lot of conservatives saying that she was a sexist and she hated men, therefore we're going to boycott it. It have made over $1 billion now.
Really?
Yeah, I just saw it yesterday. And I love this aspect of, sure, you might not like it. I was not that huge of a fan of Captain Marvel. I thought it was okay. But I just love this getting proven wrong, because this movie does not have to be for white men. You might not want to see it, but other people might. And you should just respect that. I mean, as Jordan Peele said, this white man movie have been made 1 million times. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with it. It's just...
You need some fresh air.
Yeah, and you're also going to get more white people movie. It's not something that's going to go away.
I mean, the classic Hollywood system is breaking down all over. There's no denying it. I mean, there is just a new way of being... Because we've also seen a lot of actors who are minorities, who've made a lot of money during the years, who are now launching their own studios, producing movies. And we've also seen like a breakdown between TV and movies, where actors go from one to the other, but also directors. I mean, the Russo brothers, who directed the last two Captain Americas and the Civil War, and then they directed Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. All they'd done before they came on board the Marvel, they'd done TV comedies. Their main like claim to fame was that they were some of the most common directors on Community, the TV show.
Yeah.
I mean, they really came out of nowhere, and that's because people are now getting chances based off of, more than just, what's proven to be a success.
And it's just like, Donald Glover, Childish Gambino.
Yeah.
I mean, gone into Community as a comedian actor, then becomes a rapper, then creates his own comedy show, Atlanta, which is, by the way, fantastic series.
I actually think that's also a good segment to the racial aspect of Get Out, because Get Out is dealing with racism in a different way than other movies are, because there is a lot of racism in Hollywood, even though these people are seen as the liberal elite or liberal people who want diversity, but it's this underlying racism where they want equality, but they might not think it's going to sell, or they're not going to give the opportunities, but they are going to vote for Obama, so they are not racist.
Yeah, I mean, this is the part of racism that I actually believe is the most prevalent in today's age. Because if you go back 50 years, 100 years ago, we had the vicious racism, the horrible, like, physical, violent racism, where people actually died. But racism has developed a huge deal since then, and I think this movie really portrayed it very well, because the way that, how Chris always feels so uncomfortable around people who are not black, and this movie tells a lot about why he feels that way.
I mean, and it's even seen when the parents are trying to be, nice, and like the father says, "Yeah, I would have voted for Obama a third time."
Exactly.
I mean, it's like it's a new way of saying, we know you're. I mean, I'm not against you, but I still see you as different. It's a weird new way of doing it.
And just in the even finer things he does with the first thing he says, "How you doing, my man?" I mean, he says "my man" all the time, and you just know you're only saying this because you want this black guy to relate to you, so you can get some common ground some way. But what you really are doing is that you further the differences between you, because he's not saying this
Exactly. We talked about how Chris wasn't the regular stereotype, which is exactly what he's reduced to by the father. He's reduced to the regular stereotype of who a black guy is.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the racism that people normally do not discuss. And it's not, as Dennis mentioned, it's not as bad as this vicious racist in the past. And there's still some places in the South where it's extremely bad, like the alt-right and neo-Nazis are coming up and supporting Donald Trump in some areas. But it's still an important aspect because white people sometimes think they are living in this colorblind society where they voted for Obama, therefore they have no problem with racial issues. But that's not necessarily true. Just because you voted for a black president and you wanted black people to be a part of the society does not mean you doesn't treat people of different races differently, because you still have the stereotype of how African American is. And I believe that's why I don't like this colorblind society theory. It doesn't work. Everybody has these prejudges of people. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to acknowledge that you might not have some idea of people that's not necessarily true. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or you're racist as in the old days, but it means that you probably have to acknowledge that there are some ways you might interact with people differently. And that doesn't make you a bad person, that just makes you human.
Yeah, I mean, that's also one of the things that Jordan Peele says, that he wanted to get over this thought that when Obama became the president, that we came into a post-racial era, because that's just far from true.
Yeah, that's
at
ridiculous.
All. But one of the things that I always found fascinating is that this way of portraying racism is not only precise in the U.S. I mean, the protagonist, Chris, who's originally from Britain, this is something he could also, this is something he had told media that he can relate to, this kind of racism where he always put into the stereotypical box. I mean, I can relate to it somehow, but obviously not as bad as people in the US though. But this is the kind of racism that I think is most prevalent today. This subtle way of putting people into the various stereotypes where you're not judging them by the individual standard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that you are automatically a horrible person if you have a difficult time knowing how to speak to someone who's different than you. I mean, it's an issue everyone faces. I've met people who are vastly different from me, where I've been like, okay, where can I find somewhere where we can relate? Where it's been hard knowing like what's the lines. But it's but the important thing is that you examine yourself and how am I reacting to this? What am I doing, and what might I be doing wrong? And try and be honest with yourself.
And I remember one of the texts I was reading in one of the classes. I don't remember which. I think it was the Trump subject I had by a scholar called Lawrence Bobo. And he made an extremely great point where he called it laissez-faire racism, where racism doesn't exist anymore and everything is sort of free, so you can say whatever you want. And what he also made out that I think is an extremely great point, especially in a movie like Get Out, is that people are more, and here he's talking especially about white people, they're more afraid of being called racist than actually being racist. Yeah. And that's an extremely good point. He made also some points about where he compared to a person who basically on Twitter called, and she was a government official called Michelle Obama and Abe in heels. And that's a directly racist tweet. But when she was called racist, said that it was a racist tweet, she started using these excuses. No, it's not racist. I love people of color and so on and so on. And that's the problem is they're more afraid of being perceived as racist than actually being racist. And in a way, that's kind of scary. I mean, there's nothing wrong with you facing your own problems and you can try to improve it. But this idea that you're more afraid of being faced with these issues than actually being it directly is kind of scary.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that people sometimes lack the nuance in this whole thing, because I definitely noticed a lot of this, that people have this idea that if you're a racist, then you always say racist things. No, it's not necessarily like that. You could not be a racist. You could be the most progressive individual ever, but you say sometimes some racist things. Yeah. I say racist things for just because I think it's entertaining sometimes. But I'm always trying to know my audience before I say anything. And at the same time, you can be a really racist person, but you can still vote for Obama because maybe he can maybe it can further your agenda somehow. I mean, we see this in Get Out. I mean, various people who are wholeheartedly believe they're not racist, but they don't see the hypocrisy when they only use black bodies as vessels for their consciousness. I mean, I had this wonderful one of the minor roles. Well, maybe not minor roles, but the one guy who is actually bought Chris's body because of his eyes, the blind guy. I mean, when Chris first meets that guy, he's the only one during that whole party who is like, don't care about these people. They don't know what real people goes through. So he actually has more sympathy and empathy for African Americans than the rest of the people. But he still bought him. Yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah, I think a good example of how racism can be difficult to deal with is perhaps in the use of the N-word.
Yeah,
because I mean, it's difficult. Because I know a lot of people who are not afraid to say it when they sing along to a rap song, or even just throw it out there sometimes. Because they are portraying some stereotype or something like that, and it's like. I know it's a bad word with a lot of bad connotations, but when there are no black people around, it's hard to be all that offended. Because I mean, every time I've changed my opinion a lot on when it's okay to say this word, from never ever ever to so as long as no one's around. And so it's difficult. And I mean, I don't want to be the one who says to my friends, you really shouldn't use that word. Because I'd feel like a dick being the one who's always saying that. But on the other hand, sometimes they say it in a way where I'm like, wow, that's really visceral. I mean, and I feel uncomfortable about it.
Context matters.
Yeah, I mean, I have a clear definition of this, but this is just a whole lot of thought process going into this, because one of the theories that I actually highlighted in the last episode with Sarah Hinches when we were talking about cultural appropriation, I think the N-word is such a taboo word because of the still prevalent inequality in the US. I mean, I always make this US-France comparison because I've been in both countries. I've not been in the US, but I know a lot about the US. But I've been in France, and while it is still a bad word to say in France, it doesn't have the same connotations as in the US, and I think that it has a lot to do with inequality. With that said, I have a real case where in Denmark, this happened in Denmark in last semester, where I actually had a group project, and this one student who was actually from his parents was from South Africa, or he was, and then there was this white guy in the group, and he accidentally, the context was. Well, he said the N-word because he was referring to this South Park episode, with Randy Marsh, where he's supposed to say naggers, not the N-word, and he just getting a whole lot of trouble for it, and he's just saying it because it was so funny. So it wasn't meant in a racist level or anything. No, but this guy, the guy from South Africa, he took it really personal. Like, he didn't call him the word, and I felt that was inappropriate because in Danish context it doesn't have the same history. I mean, he shouldn't say it in your presence. He knows that. It was a one-time slip-up, but that one time he was just mad at him for like a month. That was crazy.
I have another example of that's not like your example. That's actually an example of where one of my extremely good friends, who is white, he talked to when I went to his high school. He said to one of also my friends who's black from Norwegian, I think his parents from Somalia or something. It doesn't really matter, but he at one time just said to him, and when I heard he had said that, I wasn't there at the time, but he told me afterwards. I was like, "What are you doing?" He said to him, sort of translated, "Hey, what's up, Blackie?" and I was just like, dude, and my black friend there, he was like, call me Adan. My name is Adan. He was not happy with it, and they have been friends throughout several months. But that's exactly, I have never ever thought about saying that, because you can also like see I knew him pretty closely at the time, and you could see that would be a thing he would be extremely uncomfortable with, and that's exactly the thing is that my white friend thought they are friends, but he thought that because they're friends he could say these things, and that's the problem is, dude, think about it twice. You're basically just taking his skin color and making that to his entire personality. And there are some black people who can go along with it, and where you are allowed to say this in this context if you're a friend because they know where you are at. But there are also some, as you have mentioned, some black people who do not want to be associated at all with these things because they want to be seen as an individual, not just a person with a skin color.
Yeah, I mean, this is not only black who faces this issue, but just immigrants in general. I mean, I always call this when you go into a white collective. You need white people to get in their comfort zone before they come with the silly racist jokes. It usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks, then they come. Usually does, but I can take it, so I don't care. But you should definitely be aware of people who are not that likely to those kind of jokes But I think the difference with the blackie thing and what my white friend said, that he was just using it in the context of referring to a comedy show.
I agree, it's not the same.
It's not the same. And just because this was a single slip-up, it was just a single slip-up. I mean, I know all about the apartheid and how sensitive of an issue it is, but even though, just like you need people to have context with your life experience, you need to have context with others' life experience. If it's not a malicious intent, you should be able to say, okay, dude, it's not okay. I feel uncomfortable just saying the word around me, so please don't say that.
Yeah.
That would be the perfect way to tackle that whole situation without, But
it is difficult.
It is difficult. I mean, I don't disagree with that, but it's really important, man, to get to put yourself in other people's perspective.
Yeah, but it's and I mean, of course, the history in America is important to this issue. I mean,
Totally.
and it's not something that Jordan Peele is unafraid to deal with. I mean, he goes out of his way to make history an explicit part of it when the protagonist is saved by picking cotton.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he really is not afraid to tackle these things.
No.
I mean, it's a great ironic twist on it that he can do that, and because it's. I mean, it just brings back all these horrible things that happen. References that, but it's also a triumphant moment for the black guy. So it's an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at all the symbolism to racism in the movie. I mean, you have the Armitage family. The Rose and her parents and brother, they live in this plantation-like house. When you see it, you have the black workers there with, what's her name, Georgina and Walter, being the
gardener and
the gardener and the
who's actually the grandparents.
Yeah, it was actually the grandparents. I mean, just Walter with that smile he has, to just looks at you.
And the running.
Yeah, the running.
But that's Walter. That's the skinny guy, a young person, right?
No. It's the groundskeeper who.
But what's the other person?
That's his name is. His original name is Andre Hayward, or something like that.
And he's also an interesting character because when he comes to this party they're having, which is really this, we're going to buy the protagonist in the movie, but he's the only black guy there, and the protagonist goes over to him because he thought, okay, finally somebody I can relate to, and he starts talking, hey, what's up? And then he's just like, he's acting completely white back to him. It's just like, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah, it's just after the hypnosis, because he snaps back after
the flash.
After the flash.
Yeah.
And right after he comes to the room, I can never forget what he says when he's leaving. Well, you have to do without my marvelous wits. Yeah. And Chris just looking at him. Because he just felt like that short period where he was actually himself. He felt he knew him. That's what he says to Rose.
Yeah.
When he was lashing onto me, I felt like I knew him.
Yeah.
And then he was
suddenly alien again.
He was suddenly a white person again in a black body.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole thing. The thing I do where if you're going to fist bump and I just grab the hand.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can personally relate. White people are horrible at that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm horrible at that stuff.
Yeah, I know. I experienced.
Yes. So,
but I also do it on purpose though, because I just feel it's just endless entertainment for me.
Some people get extremely annoyed when you do that. When you fist bump, you just grab their fist.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I just like begin to throttle the hand, and then it just becomes awkward. But it takes some funny twist sometimes. But back to the topic though. But I mean, it's just the whole symbolism. I mean, one of the things that you talked about, the cotton in the chair. I just love the whole scenery where he's sitting in that chair and he's looking at the deer, where he realizes that his black body, just like that deer, is like collection for them.
It's a commodity.
Exactly, and the point where the whole party sequence is just really interesting dialogue, because how, even though they don't proclaim themselves as not racist, they really say some funny things, really funny things, like the one guy who says that black is in fashion, because, and this ties on to the whole thing that I feel really interesting, is it's one of the things that I'm sure everyone at the American Studies program has read about. You know, W.E. Du Bois, who's talking about the double consciousness. And since Bubba is such a huge fan of him, would you please explain the double consciousness?
Yeah, I'm going to write a BA project about him. I absolutely love Du Bois. But double consciousness is this idea of you're always a two-ness, that you always is seeing as two persons in one body, and you can never be the one person, one individual. In other words, you are an American, but you're also African, you're black. And you cannot separate these two, so you're both and neither at the same time, because you're always seen through the eyes of other people. So no matter where you are in society as an African American, you are, for example, if we're talking about this movie by liberals, you can't be seen as a victim, even though you might have been grown up in a middle-class society. You're still seen as oppressed, and people are feeling sorry for you, and this entire thing, I'm going to vote for Obama the third time, like this is your entire identity. And you might even be a black conservative. There's not a lot of them, but there are some. So it's always about this being seen through the eyes of other people and not be seen as an individual yourself.
I mean, we also see this in the way that they talk about their bodies, and I mean, especially the way the brother keeps talking about sports. I mean, would you be good at this sport? Would you be good at that sport? Because it's really, I mean, that's a lot of black people are reduced to that role, to be the entertaining sports guy. I mean, and it's seen as one of the ways that they can try and better themselves is by becoming these athletes who are there for the entertainment of the white masses.
I mean, you really see the duality of the double consciousness in that scene where he's just, if you just push your body to the limit, you will be a fucking beast. He literally say this to him.
Yeah.
And this is the duality, because either you see African Americans as these athletes, artists, basketball, football players, or whatever, or you see them as beasts. I mean, uncivilized people. Because then he asked me, you must have been in some street fights as a kid.
Yeah.
And
it's a very thin line between the two, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a very, very thin line. I mean,
he does it perfectly, because also Chris just looks at him. Is he saying I'm a savage?
Yeah.
Or is it really complimenting me? Because it's so hard. What he's saying, is it a compliment, or is it trying to provoke me?
Yeah.
And Jeremy in the show, he is really the most vicious of them all. I mean, he's the one who's enjoying to grab them by the head. And I mean, I noticed this, that even the parents, they're always afraid of Jeremy. Don't hurt him.
I actually think Jeremy is supposed to represent the vicious racist in the movie, instead of this liberal racist that's in society. He's sort of the old school Southern racist who actually just hate black people. Yeah, I mean, the way that where the mother, after she hypnotizes him when he tries to get out, where they all have to lift,
they keep telling him, the parents, look at the movie, they keep telling him, don't drop him now, don't drop him, you damaged him enough. So they're really afraid that he because he definitely wants to hurt him. So
yeah, but also because he's been reduced to a commodity at this point.
Yeah.
He's something to be sold. He's no longer a person. Now he's just an object.
yeah,
Which they really underline that by the way they behave.
and I also think that Jeremy might have had this from his grandfather, because the whole thing about the grandfather is just every dialogue just ties together. That's what I love about this movie, right? The grandfather, he was the one who lost to Jesse Owens in the qualification round going to Berlin, where Jesse Owens ends up winning all the gold medals in front of Hitler, right? And he when the father Roman, he said, oh, he's a Roman, oh, he's Dean, when he says, yeah, he almost got over it. Maybe Jeremy lacks the same thing, because he is just maybe he's one of those athletes who is just jealous of the black body, because he sees it as an advantage, so he hates it. So maybe one day he wants to have his own black body, to use it for, what was it, jiu-jitsu or whatever it was. Yeah. So I think that the grandfather has passed that jealousy into his grandson.
But it's also, I mean, Jesse Owens is also an incredible thing to bring into it, because his story is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's always this myth about him, how Hitler wouldn't acknowledge him. But which Jesse Owens himself said that's patently wrong. I mean, Hitler was ready to acknowledge him, even shook his hand. It was when he came home he experienced racism, because when they had a party for all the winners, he wasn't allowed to go into the front entrance. He had to go into the service entrance. And when all the other white athletes went to the White House to greet the president, he wasn't allowed to come. So he experienced more racism at home than he did in Nazi Germany.
And that
says a lot about how vicious their system has been.
And as well, when we're talking about World War II and racism, we had a lecture not that long ago about why in World War II movies do you never see any black people fighting. And it's not because there wasn't any black people in World War II, but they had their own division.
Yeah.
In other words, they were not allowed to fight side by side with other white people. They were segregated.
And they were usually in the front lines.
And that's also what a lot of black people said, that they fought for freedom over there to sort of free Europe and all these freedom we love today. But when they came home, they could not benefit from any of the freedom some of them died for.
Yeah. A great movie also by an African-American director that deals with that is Mudbound on Netflix, which is about two veterans who return to the American South, a black and a white man, and how they have to deal with returning to the way things are, especially when they both seen this combat, they both fought for their freedoms, and then one is suddenly has them stripped away again. He no longer gets to experience them.
No, yeah, and one of the interesting roles in this movie, Get Out, is Rose. Because even though she is probably the biggest traitor in this movie, I mean, she seems to me like the most evil one, like the most psychopath, because just how manipulative she is. And I found it fascinating that even though she is probably the most psychopath and most manipulative, she's actually the one who seems to know the inside of African Americans' mindset.
Yeah, I mean, a clear sign that she's a psychopath is the fact that she does not mix her milk with her cereal. I mean, already there, she was a psychopath.
Yeah, I mean, that whole symbolism there is the segregation. I mean, they colored Fruity Loops in the bowl with the milk. Outside on the tray. it just looks so weird. Yeah. But I actually have this theory why she is so good. I think that because she is basically this white trophy who is become extremely adept at attracting black guys for some reason. But I have this assumption that she might have been just as awkward as her parents and Jeremy in the beginning, but she has just been with so many black guys now that she just knows the inside of the head and how to trigger them and how to get their trust.
But I also think that just like you said, Jeremy represented the vicious Southern racism. I think she's perhaps the Northern, more insidious, the more modern racism, the one that's under the surface, that's hidden beneath this veneer of acceptance as being
the gentrifying racist.
Yeah, exactly.
the one. I would probably agree. I mean, I don't even know where I would put the mother, because she's the most mysterious one.
Yeah.
She is just mysterious. I mean, she's cruel the way, she just digs into Chris's head when he talks about the mother and everything, but she's the one that's a mystery to me. But
I also think perhaps she represents some of the ways that African Americans' minds were twisted. How they were, how they were told and they were, enforced to think in certain ways about themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, they were taught from the beginning that they were lesser. They were taught that they could do these things and not these things, and that they had to, they had to be a certain way. Yeah. And how this has twisted their mindset. I think she perhaps represents some of that.
Yeah.
The father is also an interesting character because he's probably the most obvious visible character who's not racist. But I actually think, in some ways, and that's something we have just learned about, that in American sports and Cote d'Ivoire, he sort of represents this Jewish relationship to African Americans, because there's a lot of African Americans, especially James Baldwin, read about text about how they absolutely hate Jewish people, and it's because they have both been victimized in such a sense. So there's this idea that they should understand how African Americans are, and they should sort of fight on their side. Instead, we sort of take their whiteness and just becomes this, sure, we support black people, but we also sort of see them as a commodity we can make money of it. We're not really helping them in the way they should. And that's why a lot of African Americans hate Jewish people. And when you read some of the things that some African Americans talking about Jewish people, it's extremely anti-Semitic. Yeah. But it is because they have this history that they should know better, but they're still acting like the white people are doing.
But I think it's interesting because you could make many of the same arguments when the LGBT wave came, that that black people were not among their main supporters, because a lot of black people are deeply religious. But suddenly they were part of the oppressors. They were part of the ones who said, "No, you can't be this way. You can't be this person. Then you are lesser."
Yeah, I had this one Atlanta episode. The talk show episode where you have the transracial guy. He's just this black teenager who feels like a white guy. And then he talks about, then he has to share his opinion on, then he has to share his opinion on a transsexual man, and he's like, that's an abomination. And also,
but that also ties into some of the ideas of the toxic black masculinity.
Yeah,
like there's some ways that they have been twisted in their own way by their past, which has meant that their ideals of what makes a man, what makes you a man, that has been is separate from what perhaps ideas of white masculinity is.
Yeah, I mean, I also think this is something a part of it, because the LGBTQ community has had so much traction in these last 10 years. I mean, the whole progress with that movement has just been spectacular. I mean, in the last 10 years, and I think it was highlighted in a Dave Chappelle show where he says, "I can't believe the trans people are beating us in the discrimination Olympics." Because where he says, I mean, black people wear heels in Brooklyn just to feel safe. So I think that also ties on to this whole thing, because I feel maybe that the Jewish people and for example, the Bruce Jenner who became Caitlyn Jenner, that they could do this because they were actually white. That's why they had so much traction, and that's a pretty interesting debate, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, and it is interesting to see how oppressed groups are often turned against one another, because it is a tactic that's been used throughout history, and is still in some ways used today. That as long as the oppressors can keep the oppressed targeting each other, they won't be able to rise up against the oppressors.
I mean, just look at almost all the countries that the British Empire in its golden age had, and how much turmoil there still is in those countries, because of the, how they just fucked up the.
Absolutely. I mean, in India there was a specific tactic of making antagonizing the Hindus and the Muslims and making them target each other, which we still see play out today in Pakistan.
I mean, Pakistan is a country which you can say that British, they created that.
Yeah, they created it in a almost purposely shitty manner.
Yeah.
I mean, when they were getting out of India as fast as they could, they brought in a guy who had no knowledge of the situation to draw some random lines on a map to separate them. Yeah. I mean, it's always been a tactic. I mean, we see it today on Fox News with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
He was portraying himself as this, man of the people who are, who's all against the elites. Despite the fact that he is part of the elite. He is a trust fund baby. And in his past, he's been open about that. But now he's changed his tactics and he's really portraying himself as, a man of the people. And then he keeps talking about these culture wars issues instead of, focusing on the things that are actually hurting the American people.
Yeah, and we kind of sidetracked in the end, but that's what happens in a podcast. But just to wrap up the whole thing, I mean, we can definitely agree that the Get Out was an incredible movie. It was a fresh breath of air when it comes to horror.
Yeah, I just love the part that they're showing racism in a different way.
Yeah,
but there's this idea that if you're liberal and you support black presidents or African American ideals, you do not have any racist bone in your body. There's still some problem that you have to face, because you might not think that you're treating black people differently, but.
And I think the biggest message is that ignoring racism is just maybe more dangerous than actually, what racism was for 50 or 100 years ago.
I wouldn't go that far, but I do agree that this laissez-faire racism does not.
It does not. It does have repercussions.
It does, and it is an idea that basically you can ignore some of the black struggle as long as you say you support it, but your action might actually go against it.
Yeah. So and next week we're gonna talk about our favorite Republican in the White House.
This is actually going to be interesting.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the Trump investigation, Bubba, if you could.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the Trump investigation, and we're going to get one of our professors in called Young Brundale, who knows a lot of this stuff. So we're going to talk about what the Trump investigation showed, what kind of repercussion it's going to have, and maybe not will Trump be impeached. That's the sort of things we're going to talk about in the next episode. So that's going to be extremely interesting.
Yeah.
And see also talk about how the Democrats are going to deal with this investigation have now coming to an end.
Yeah. And just as Bobby said, Jørgen, he is a Trump specialist. He was actually his prostate examiner. So he knows a lot of what's going on into the White House. Now, that last one was a lie, but he knows a lot about it. That's the essential thing. And now that the NBA season is about to wrap up, the regular season is about to wrap up, we are also going to make an extra episode with Rasmus, where we're going to talk about our projections going into the postseason and just a sharing of opinions about what this season has had to offer.